So, as busy parents, obviously, we're always looking for good childcare for our children. We're looking for interesting classes for them to go. We don't want to leave them alone at home, for example, and we want like the involvement of like maybe friends or like grandparents, right? So, a question to you is, if you could go to a shop today and buy an artificial friend for your child who would be programmed to make sure that your child doesn't feel lonely, has someone to talk to, be their companion till they become old enough to go off to college, would you do that today? Right? It's an interesting question, right? Because you have like Alexa in the home who can like play your child's favorite songs perhaps and like answer a couple of homework questions. I haven't reached the homework stage, but that's what I believe. So really, if you had this like walking talking robot, which we keep hearing are coming, would you get this companion for your child? Now this is like really the start of this book, which is like very, it's by this acclaimed author, Kazuo Ishiguro, who's won the Nobel Literature Prize, and it's called Klara and the Sun. So the whole video actually starts with Josie and her mother going and picking up this artificial friend called Clara. Once Clara comes home, she tries to understand where Josie is coming from and tries to really be there for Josie. The book is told from Clara's point of view, but as things carry on, it becomes very clear that there's a lot more to the story. So, question number two. Josie is actually going through a process called uplifting, which seems to be a genetic modification made to children to make them smarter, right? So instead of hiring tutors, instead of doing all these like all these extra classes, like what if you could just go and get a genetic modification made, and if successful, which is a big if over here, your child would be set up for success. Now in the world that this book inhabits, it's not a the uplifting, as it's called, is not actually available to you based on like your already demonstrated like giftedness. It's sort of, if you can afford it, you go in for it. But as we find out through the story, it's not a it's got its own complications, because Josie actually had a sibling before her who succumbed to these medical complications. So the mother is actually taking a punt with her second child by getting it done again, and it seems to be a point of tension with the father, right? So it's a very ethical and very complicated issue, because firstly, a, you can just buy it off the shelf, it seems, and then secondly, like what does that mean to your child? Does your child give consent for this? Like what are the circumstances that surround something like this being possible? The third bit is, Josie starts going to get her portrait made, and then during the course of this book we realize that it's not really a portrait, it's actually someone making like this outer shell of Josie, like it's her likeness. And if she actually succumbs to these medical issues and she dies, basically Clara is going to then be tasked to become Josie, right? Like she's going to be a download of all her memories, her feelings, how she speaks, and she's going to be stand-in for Josie, for her parents. Now, I mean, I know this is not so far away from the world that we live in, because there are a couple of programs out there which are basically trying to help people still communicate with their loved ones who are deceased. I was doing a little bit of a search and I was trying to look at the companies. The most famous, of course, is Replica AI, the genesis of which was based in tragedy. But there are others. So there's something called Gone Too Soon. I think Anthropic also had something called Project December. Yeah, and there's Luca AI. So if you can submit like all these videos and you can submit all these voice notes and everything you submit, you can potentially still talk to someone who's not around. So it's already happening, though it's not happening in the way that is described in like Klara and the Sun, which is like parents who cannot, I guess, bear to lose their children will just have their children live on in the form of these AI robots, and it's very disturbing, isn't it? Like, I mean, to think about it. So yeah, I think the idea that like we have AI here today, and of course there's a huge conversation about productivity and like customer calls are going to become better, and businesses are going to save money, and sure, like all that is happening and is going to disrupt industries, and other people are focusing on that. But there is a huge place in our society for people who are lonely, right? People who want friendship, like people who want companionship. And can AI, which is according to Anthropic becoming more and more persuasive, and according to other people becoming more human like in their responses every day, just be fitted into something that looks like a human and become our friends? And then what does that mean for us? In the book, there's a little part where parents are actually arranging like this play date. It's a way to make children meet other children, because they're spending so much life on their screens and with their artificial friends. So I think this book is actually like, it is again one of those dystopian sci-fi novels. So you can see my taste, being with the other part is that it does raise all these ethical and moral questions about things that like are probably not so far off in terms of being possible, and will we as a society allow these things to take place? And the second big conversation that I'm really interested in is, how do children see these kind of technologies and these kind of companions? We have so many researchers who flag today that like there has to be a debate about allowing minors to talk to like AI. They could actually have these emotional dependencies. They may not understand, like that this is a machine. It can manipulate children. It can, like, all that. And then in this book is really interesting because Josie basically knows it's a companion there for her through her childhood, and then goes off to college, and Clara is basically sent to the yard, which is somewhere where she will just die out. Basically, she's going to become really old. So in this book, the child sort of knows that this is like a teacher or a nanny or something, that someone who they will outgrow in time, and that is a natural progression of life. And so it's very matter of fact in some ways. And there is some mention, there is societal debate about, the ethics of all this. But it's interesting. And of course, we, in the real world, are facing a different kind of dilemma, which is like, what will this really mean? And does the child actually understand? And can we end up having children who are manipulated by these machines, depending on what is fed to the machines and what kind of companionship they're giving the machines? So yeah, a lot of questions, to be debated. And I think, you don't need to be a parent to really get involved. But certainly when I was reading this, I was thinking, my God, like, would I like to have a AI friend for my daughter? Or like, if they were available, it's, I'm thinking of iPads. And like, I read this book the other day that I spoke about. It's like, can you give an iPad only at the age of 14? And it's like, okay, now we're talking about off the shelf AI companion. So, where is life going so quickly? In the meantime, back to paper and pencil and drawing and all those old fashioned things, I would like to recommend this book to you. It's called Milo Imagines the World. And it's basically the story of this kid who loves to draw, and he sits in the tube, and he rides up the tube with his sister, and all the people that he sees on his journey, he makes little cartoon drawings of them, and he kind of imagines them with these amazing, these amazing lives, just from his first glance. And he sees this young child who looks very rich, he's dressed very well, and he's sort of going on the same train, and he imagines him as a prince. And basically, at the end of the stop, it turns out that both the children are actually going to a prison because they're visiting their parents over there. And Milo basically realizes that he cannot actually tell the whole story by seeing someone on a train that one time. And so when he comes back, his drawings change, and he imagines different lives for them. And he realizes that through his creativity and through his drawings, he can actually like change his impression of what people think. He can actually imagine a different world for them. So it's a beautiful book, and my daughter and I have really enjoyed reading it together. And when she sees him drawing, she gets really inspired to do her own drawing. So it's not just great to read together and discuss the different people that come in our lives. Anybody who read Philip Larkin back in like optional literature high school courses like I did, it's always about those, people who cross each other. Like, it's like a frail traveling coincidence. I think it's in the Whitson weddings where like you share a moment together. It's just a coincidence, and you always have that moment. So it's like these two boys who have that moment in the subway together, and they'll be locked in that moment because they locked eyes, and they may remember it, but it's just a coincidence. They probably won't see themselves again. So it reminds me actually of high school poetry classes as well, which is why I loved the book. Anyway, so these are my two recommendations. Let me show you. um, yeah, and I do hope that you enjoyed this video as well. Please like, please subscribe, tell your friends. This is video 6 of a 10 video sprint. So I hope you liked it, and I will stop talking now.